The silver chains burned against Kyle's wrists as two warriors dragged her before the assembled moon court, her bare feet scraping across cold marble stained with the blood of previous judgments. Every alpha in the northern territories had gathered in the grand hall, their eyes gleaming with predatory interest as she stumbled and nearly fell, catching herself just before her knees hit the ground. The shame of appearing weak before them scorched through her chest, but she forced her chin up, forced herself to meet the furious gaze of Alpha Thorn as he rose from his carved throne. "You stand accused of the highest crime an Omega can commit." Thorn's voice boomed through the vaulted chamber, and Kale felt the weight of 300 wolves pressing down on her through their combined dominance. "Conception without permission. Bearing a child in secret. Hiding bloodline magic that belongs to this pack." "I didn't hide anything." Kale's voice came out hoarse, her throat raw from the interrogation that had lasted through the night. "I didn't know." "Silence!" Thorn's fist slammed against the throne's armrest, and the crack of splintering wood echoed like a gunshot. "Your daughter healed a dying pup with a single touch." "Healing magic hasn't existed in Omega bloodlines for 3 centuries. You will tell us which alpha sired your bastard child, or you will watch her die before your execution." The threat struck her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Kyle's wolf howled inside her chest, throwing itself against the silver-induced cage that kept her from shifting. Through the narrow window high above, she could see the kennels where they'd locked Sarah, her 4-year-old daughter pressed against the bars, her small face streaked with tears. The child's gift had manifested yesterday when old Werner's grandson collapsed during training, his heart giving out from an undiagnosed defect. Sarah had touched the boy's chest, and golden light had poured from her palms, knitting his damaged heart back together while 20 witnesses watched in stunned silence. "Her father is dead," Kale whispered, and it wasn't entirely a lie. The male who'd sired Sarah had died the night she conceived, his identity a secret she'd carried like a knife against her ribs for 5 years. "He died before I knew I was pregnant." "Then you admit you laid with an alpha without pack sanction." Thorn descended the dais steps, each footfall deliberate, threatening. "You concealed a pregnancy that should have resulted in your immediate execution. You raised a child with bloodline magic, and never reported her gift to the hierarchy. 3 capital offenses. Omega. Your death is already sealed. But your daughter, she could be useful. If you tell us everything about her father's lineage, we might let her live as pack property." Pack property. The words meant a life of servitude, of being passed between alphas for breeding, of never knowing freedom or choice or safety. Kyle had lived that life until she'd escaped into the forest 5 years ago, heavily pregnant and desperate. She'd found the abandoned cottage at the edge of pack territory, and somehow, miraculously, no one had discovered them. She'd kept Sarah hidden, kept her gifts suppressed with careful training and constant vigilance, until yesterday. "Please." Kyle's voice broke on the word, and she hated herself for begging, but she would debase herself 1,000 times to protect her daughter. "She's just a child. She doesn't understand what she did. Let her go. I'll tell you anything you want. I'll submit to any punishment. Just let her go." "You have nothing to bargain with." Thorn circled her like a predator toying with wounded prey, and she could smell his arousal, his excitement at having complete power over her fate. "You're a nameless Omega who should have been culled at birth. The only reason you lived this long was because you were useful for Alpha Thorn." The voice that interrupted came from the great doors at the chamber's entrance, and every wolf in the room froze. The voice carried absolute authority, the kind of dominance that made alphas bow and omegas bare their throats in instinctive submission. "I believe that Omega belongs to me." Kale's head snapped toward the entrance, and her heart stopped. The male who stood silhouetted in the doorway stood well over 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the morning light streaming through the entrance. He wore black leather that clung to heavily muscled arms and chest, silver buckles gleaming at his wrists and throat. His hair fell to his shoulders in waves so dark they seemed to absorb light, And his eyes burned like molten gold as they fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf whimper and press close to her consciousness. Alpha King Dristan! Thorn's voice had gone tight with barely concealed rage, but he executed a stiff bow. We were not informed of your arrival. I don't announce my movements to subordinate alphas. Dristan's boots struck the marble floor with measured precision as he strode into the chamber, and Kale watched every wolf in the room bare their throats in deference. The Alpha King of the Northern Realm, ruler of 43 packs, the most powerful wolf alive. She'd heard stories about him since childhood. Brutal, merciless, capable of killing with a glance. That Omega and her child are under my protection. Release her, now. With respect, Alpha King, this Omega broke pack law. Thorn's jaw worked as he struggled to maintain his authority. She conceived without permission, hid a child with bloodline magic. I don't recall asking for a summary of your petty accusations. Dristan's voice dropped to something cold and lethal, and Kale felt the temperature in the room plummet. I said release her! The child possesses healing magic that hasn't been seen in generations. She could strengthen our breeding lines. The Alpha King moved with speed that defied physics, crossing 20 feet in the space between heartbeats. His hand closed around Thorn's throat and lifted him clear off the ground, the older Alpha's feet kicking uselessly as Dristan's claws extended and pressed against his jugular. That child, he said softly, dangerously, is under my personal protection. If you threaten her again, I will remove your pack from existence. Do you understand me? Thorn's face had gone purple, his hands clawing at Dristan's wrist. He managed a strangled noise that might have been agreement, and Dristan dropped him contemptuously. The Alpha collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, while his Beta rushed forward to support him. Remove her chains, Dristan ordered, and 3 wolves scrambled to obey, their hands shaking as they unlocked the silver cuffs. The moment the metal fell away, Kale's wolf surged forward with such force she nearly shifted right there, raw power flooding her limbs as her healing factor kicked in and started repairing the silver burns on her wrists. Where is the child? The kennels. Kale's voice came out steadier than she felt, but inside she was screaming with confusion and fear. Why would the Alpha King claim her? They'd never met. She would have remembered those eyes, that presence, the way her wolf was currently throwing itself against her control, trying to get closer to him. Please. She's terrified. She doesn't understand. Show me. It wasn't a request. Kale's legs moved before her mind caught up, leading him through the assembled wolves who pressed themselves against the walls to give the Alpha King space. She could feel his presence at her back like a physical weight, protective and possessive in a way that made no sense. They passed through the servants' entrance and out into the yard where the breeding kennels formed a grim semicircle, and Kale's heart shattered at the sound of Sarah's sobs echoing from the largest cage. Mama! Sarah's small hands gripped the bars, her face blotchy and streaked with dirt. Mama! I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I won't do it again. Please don't let them hurt you. Move aside. Dristan's command snapped through the air, and the 2 guards stumbling over themselves to obey. He gripped the kennel door with both hands and tore it off its hinges with casual strength that sent the guards scrambling backward. Then he crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. Hello, little one. Sarah pressed herself against the back wall, her golden eyes enormous in her small face. She looked so much like Kale, it was almost painful, the same dark hair that fell in waves, the same delicate bone structure, the same stubborn chin. But her eyes, those eyes came from her father, and Kale watched Dristan go absolutely still as he stared at the child. It's all right, he said, his voice gentler than Kale had heard it. I'm here to take you and your mama somewhere safe. No one will hurt either of you again. Promise? Sarah's voice came out small and trembling. I promise on my life and my crown. Dristan extended his hand, palm up, waiting. My name is Dristan. What's yours? Sarah. The little girl studied him, with the intense seriousness only children could manage, then slowly reached out and placed her tiny hand in his much larger one. The moment their skin made contact, golden light flared between them. Not the healing magic, but something else. Something that made Kale's breath catch in her throat. Bloodline recognition. No, Kyle whispered. But Dristan was already looking at her with those burning gold eyes, and she saw the knowledge there, the terrible understanding. No, that's not possible. We're leaving. Dristan scooped Sarah into his arms with practiced ease, and the child clung to his neck like she'd been doing it her whole life. Both of you. Now, Alpha King, you cannot simply... Thorn had recovered enough to follow them into the yard, his beta and a dozen warriors at his back. That Omega is pack property. The child was conceived under our jurisdiction. You have no legal claim to either of them. Dristan turned with Sarah still in his arms, and the rage that rolled off him made every wolf in the yard drop to their bellies in instinctive submission. All except Kale, who stood frozen as his dominance washed over her, demanding and absolute. That Omega, he said with lethal precision, is my fated mate. That child is my daughter. And if any wolf in this territory suggests otherwise, I will burn your packlands to ash and salt the earth behind me. He shifted Sarah's weight to one arm and extended his other hand to Kale. Come here. It wasn't dominance that moved her. It was the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was worth protecting, like he would tear apart anyone who tried to hurt her. Kale's hand found his, and the moment their fingers intertwined, the bond snapped into place with such force it drove her to her knees. Golden light exploded outward from where they touched, the mate bond manifesting invisible waves of power that rolled across the yard and slammed into every wolf present. Kyle felt it sink into her bones, into her soul, a connection so deep and right, it made everything else in her life feel like shadow. Through the bond, she felt his wolf recognize hers, felt 5 years of searching and grief and desperate hope crash into her consciousness. You, she gasped, staring up at him as tears streamed down her face. That night, the rogue attack, you were dying. I dreamed of you every night since, Dristan said roughly, and there was such raw emotion in his voice it shattered something in her chest. I searched every pack, every territory. I thought I'd lost you forever. The memory came flooding back with perfect clarity. 5 years ago, she'd been running through the forest after escaping Thorn's pack, heavily pregnant and desperate to find shelter before winter set in. She'd heard the sounds of fighting and had hidden in the underbrush, watching as a massive black wolf fought off 6 rogues that had ambushed him. He'd killed 4 before the 5th rogue's claws raked across his throat, severing his carotid artery. The other rogues had fled, leaving him to bleed out alone. Kale's healing magic had manifested for the first time that night. She'd crawled from her hiding place and pressed her hands to his throat, golden light pouring from her palms as she knitted torn vessels and shredded muscle back together. She'd saved his life, but using that much power had sent her into early labor. By the time the black wolf had woken, she'd already fled deeper into the forest, desperate to find shelter before the contractions became unmanageable. She'd found the abandoned cottage. She'd given birth alone. And she'd never known the male she saved was the Alpha King himself. I didn't know, Kale's voice broke. I didn't know it was you. I didn't know Sira was... mine. The word came out as a growl, possessive and absolute. Dristan's hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing away her tears. You're both mine. My mate. My daughter. And I am going to make sure every wolf in this realm knows that anyone who threatens either of you will face my wrath. You can't prove the child is yours, Thorn protested weakly, but his face had gone gray as he stared at the golden light still pulsing between Dristan and Kale. A mate bond can be faked by powerful magic. Then explain this. Dristan held up his free hand, and silver fire erupted along his knuckles, his bloodline magic, the royal gift that manifested only in direct descendants of the first Alpha. Then he touched Sira's small hand, and the same silver fire bloomed along her fingers, mixing with her golden healing light to create a display so beautiful it hurt to look at directly. She carries my bloodline. She carries her mother's healing gift. And if you question my claim one more time, Thorn, I will demonstrate exactly why I rule 43 packs while you struggle to maintain one. The assembled wolves had gone utterly silent, their eyes wide with shock and fear and dawning understanding. An Omega with healing magic mated to the Alpha King, a child who carried both bloodline powers. It was the kind of thing that happened in legends, in the old stories about how the moon goddess chose her champions. Mama? Sarah's small voice broke through the tension. Is he really my papa? Kale looked at her daughter, at those golden eyes so like Dristan's, and felt something crack open in her chest. She'd spent 5 years protecting Sarah alone, hiding her gifts, living in constant fear of discovery. She'd convinced herself they were better off without anyone else, that trusting another wolf would only lead to betrayal and pain. But the bond pulsing between her and Dristan sang with truth, with recognition, with a rightness that made her wolf sing with joy. Yes, baby, she whispered. He's your papa. Sarah studied Dristan for a long moment, then threw her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. Good, because those people were mean to you and I want him to make them go away. Done, Dristan said immediately, and the single word carried the weight of an alpha's vow. He looked at Thorn with cold fury. You have 48 hours to vacate this territory. Your pack is dissolved. Any wolf who wishes to join another pack has my permission to do so. Any wolf who follows you into exile will be marked rogue and treated accordingly. You can't? Thorn's protest died. As Dristan's eyes flashed silver, his dominance slamming outward with crushing force. I am the Alpha King. I can do anything I want. He transferred Sarah to his other arm and wrapped his free hand around Kale's waist, pulling her against his side with possessive certainty. And what I want is to take my mate and daughter home, where they belong. If you or any member of your pack comes within 100 miles of them, I will kill you myself. Slowly. Do we have an understanding? Thorn's submission came in the form of a strangled noise and a jerky nod, his wolf forced down by the sheer weight of Dristan's dominance. The other wolves in the yard had their heads bowed, their throats bared in a display of absolute deference. Good. Dristan's voice softened slightly as he looked down at Kale. Can you walk? Or should I carry you both? The question, asked so gently after such a display of brutal power, made something warm unfurl in Kale's chest. I can walk. But where are we going? The capital. My home. Your home now. He started moving toward the gate, and the crowd of wolves parted before them like water. You'll have everything you need there. Safety. Protection. A life where you never have to hide what you are, or what our daughter can do. I don't understand. Kale hurried to keep pace with his long strides, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. Why did you come here? How did you even know I existed? Because 3 days ago, I felt you through the incomplete bond. Dristan's jaw tightened, and she felt a flash of remembered pain echo through their connection. When Sarah used her magic to heal that pup, it sent out a pulse of power that every alpha within 500 miles felt. But I felt something more. I felt you, the female who saved my life 5 years ago. The Omega who haunted my dreams every night since. I've been searching for you since the moment I woke up in that forest and found you gone. They'd reached the gate, where a convoy of black SUVs waited with armed warriors standing guard. Dristan settled Sira into the back seat of the lead vehicle, then turned to help Kyle climb in beside their daughter. His hand lingered on her waist, proprietary and protective. I thought I'd never find you, he said quietly, and the raw emotion in his voice made her throat tighten. I thought the moon goddess had given me a glimpse of my mate just to take you away. When I felt that pulse of power, when I realized you'd been living in hiding all this time, pregnant with my child, his voice roughened, and she saw his control slip for just a moment. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm sorry you had to go through pregnancy and birth alone. I'm sorry you spent 5 years afraid. You didn't know. Kael reached out tentatively and touched his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. I didn't know. We both thought that night was just... It wasn't just anything. Dristan caught her hand and pressed it against his chest, where his heart thundered beneath her palm. You're my fated mate. The moon goddess bound us together that night, even if the bond didn't complete until now. Everything I am, everything I have, belongs to you and our daughter. That's crazy, Kale whispered, but she couldn't deny the truth singing through the bond. The absolute certainty that this male was hers and she was his. We barely know each other. Then we'll learn. He climbed into the vehicle beside her and pulled the door shut, signaling the driver to move. As the convoy pulled away from the pack that had held her prisoner, Dristan wrapped his arm around her shoulders and tucked her against his side. We'll learn everything. How you take your coffee. Your favorite foods. What makes you laugh. What makes you feel safe. All of it. Sarah had curled up between them. Her small body relaxed in a way Kale hadn't seen since the healing incident. The little girl's eyes were already drifting closed, exhaustion finally catching up to her. She's so much like you, Dristan murmured, stroking Sarah's dark hair with gentle fingers. Brave, powerful, beautiful. She's terrified most of the time, Kale admitted quietly. I tried so hard to teach her to hide her gifts, to never let anyone see what she could do. But she saw that boy dying and she couldn't help herself. She has a healer's heart, like her mother. Dristan's golden eyes found hers, and Kale felt the bond pulse with warmth. You saved my life that night. You could have left me to die, taken whatever valuables I carried, and disappeared, but you stayed. You used magic I'm guessing you didn't even know you had, and you saved a stranger's life. I couldn't just leave you. The memory made her shudder. You were dying. Your wolf was so beautiful, even covered in blood. I couldn't. Her voice broke. I couldn't let that light go out. And in return, you gave me the greatest gift imaginable. He touched Sira's sleeping face with reverent gentleness. A daughter. A heir. A child who carries both our bloodlines. His gaze returned to Kale. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Healing magic hasn't been seen in Omegas for centuries. Royal bloodline magic hasn't manifested in a female in just as long. Our daughter is unique in the entire wolf world. That's what I was afraid of. Kale's voice dropped to a whisper. I knew if anyone discovered her gifts, they'd take her from me. They'd use her. Breed her like property. Never let her have a choice about her own life. No one will ever touch her. The promise came out as a growl, Dristan's wolf rising to the surface. She's a princess of the realm now, protected by law and by my personal power. Anyone who threatens her threatens me, and I don't lose. The confidence in his voice should have felt arrogant, but instead it felt like safety, like shelter, like the first deep breath after years of holding herself tense and ready to run. Kyle let herself lean into his warmth, let herself believe for the first time that maybe, just maybe, she and Sarah could stop running. What happens now? She asked softly. Now? Dristan's hand found hers and laced their fingers together. Now, you rest. Both of you. We have a 6-hour drive to the capital, and when we arrive, there will be a lot of people who want to meet you. Pack hierarchy. Council members. Wolves who will need to see proof of our bond and accept you as their Luna Queen. Luna Queen. The title made her stomach clench with anxiety. She'd spent her entire life as the lowest-ranked Omega, used for the worst tasks, beaten when she was too slow, nearly killed when she'd gotten pregnant. How could she possibly be a Luna Queen? Hey! Dristan's finger under her chin tilted her face up to meet his eyes. I can feel your fear through the bond. Talk to me. I don't know how to be a Luna, Kale admitted, her voice barely audible. I don't know protocol or politics or how to act around other alphas. I'm going to embarrass you. You could never embarrass me. The absolute certainty in his voice made her throat tight. You're my fated mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. You carry healing magic that hasn't been seen in generations. You bore and raised our daughter alone, kept her safe against impossible odds. You're stronger than any Luna I've ever met. I'm terrified, she whispered. I know. He pressed his forehead against hers, and through the bond, she felt his wolf wrap around hers in a gesture of protection and comfort. But you're not alone anymore. Whatever you need, whoever gives you trouble, any challenge you face, I'm right here. We face it together." The words broke something open in her chest, some wall she'd built to survive 5 years of isolation and fear. Tears streamed down her face, and Dristan made a rough sound in his throat before pulling her fully into his arms, careful not to disturb their sleeping daughter. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "I've got both of you. Forever." Kael buried her face against his chest and let herself cry, let herself release 5 years of terror and loneliness and desperate hope. Through it all, Dristan held her, his hands gentle as they stroked her back, his voice a low rumble of comfort that made her wolf purr with contentment. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes felt swollen and her face was probably blotchy. But Dristan looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Better?" he asked softly. "Getting there." She managed a watery smile. "This is all happening so fast. Yesterday I was hiding in a cottage trying to keep Syrah's magic suppressed. Today I'm mated to the Alpha King and apparently a Luna Queen. Yesterday you were alone and afraid. Today you're protected and claimed." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she felt heat spark through the bond. "Tomorrow we start building the life we should have had 5 years ago. You, me, and our daughter. What if someone challenges our bond?" The fear slipped out before she could stop it. "What if they say, I'm not good enough? That an Omega can't be Luna Queen? Then I'll rip out their throat and leave their body as a warning." Dristan's voice went cold and lethal. "You are my fated mate. The bond between us is witnessed by every wolf with functioning senses. Anyone who questions your place at my side questions the moon goddess herself, and I don't tolerate blasphemy." The fierce possessiveness in his voice made her wolf preen with satisfaction. This was an alpha worthy of their devotion, a male who would protect them with his last breath. "Besides," Dristan continued, his voice warming slightly, "you have advantages most Lunas don't. Your healing magic will make you invaluable to the pack. Warriors injured in battle can be saved. Illness that would cripple pack members can be cured. You'll be seen as a gift from the moon goddess, and you'll be right." "I don't know if I can heal on command," Kael admitted. "It only manifested twice when I saved you, and during Sarah's birth when I was hemorrhaging. I don't know how to control it." "Then we'll find someone to teach you. The royal archives go back thousands of years. There are records of Omegas with healing gifts, journals describing their training and techniques." His hand found hers again, his thumb tracing patterns on her wrist. "You'll have everything you need to master your gift. And in the meantime, just having you present will strengthen the pack bonds. A Luna Queen with healing magic is the kind of blessing that comes once in a millennium." The SUV hit a bump, jostling Sarah awake. The little girl blinked sleepily, then seemed to remember where she was and who she was with. Her golden eyes went wide as she stared up at Dristan. "Papa?" she whispered tentatively, testing the word. "Yes, little wolf." Dristan's entire expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "I'm your papa, and I'm never letting either of you go. Are we going to your house?" "Our house now. You'll have your own room, decorated however you want. A whole staff of wolves, who will make sure you have everything you need. And a big yard where you can run and play without being afraid." Syrah's face lit up with cautious hope. "Can I have a puppy?" The question was so innocent, so normal after everything that had happened, that Kael felt tears prick her eyes again. Dristan laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You can have a whole pack of puppies if you want them." He touched Sarah's nose gently. "Anything you want, princess. Name it and it's yours." "I want Mama to be happy." Sarah's small face grew serious. "She cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. She tries to hide it, but I can hear her. I want her to stop being sad." The confession made Kael's chest tighten painfully. She'd thought she'd been so careful, so quiet, but of course Sarah had known. Children always knew. "I promise you," Dristan said solemnly, his eyes meeting Kael's over their daughter's head. "I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure your mama never has a reason to cry again. Except for happy tears, Those are allowed. Good. Sira snuggled against his chest with complete trust. I like you. You smell nice. Thank you. Dristan's voice had gone rough again, and Cale felt his emotions crash through the bond, overwhelming love, fierce protectiveness, and a grief so sharp it stole her breath. Grief for the 5 years he'd missed, for the pregnancy he hadn't been there to support, for the birth he hadn't witnessed, for every moment of their daughter's life he'd lost. Hey, Kyle said softly, placing her hand over his heart. We're here now. All of us. That's what matters. I missed so much. His voice was barely a whisper. Her first word, her first step, the first time she shifted. All of it. Then we'll make new memories. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her fingertips. First days, first lessons, first time she sees the capital, all of it. Together. The word seemed to hit him like a physical blow. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his cheek as he closed his eyes. Together, he repeated, and the vow in his voice resonated through the bond, until her wolf sang with recognition. Always. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of quiet conversation and moments of comfortable silence. Sarah fell back asleep, exhausted from her ordeal, while Cale and Dristan talked in hushed voices about logistics and plans, where she and Sarah would sleep until proper rooms could be prepared. What sort of education Sarah would need? How to handle the formal introduction to the pack. There will be a claiming ceremony, Dristan said as they approached the capital's outer walls. It's traditional when an alpha king takes a mate. The entire pack will gather to witness and accept you as Luna Queen. When? Cale's stomach clenched with anxiety. We can wait until you're ready. A week? A month? Whatever you need. His hand squeezed hers reassuringly. There's no rush. The mate bond is already in place. Everything else is just ceremony. And Sarah? She'll be formally acknowledged as my heir. There will be gifts, oaths of protection, the whole spectacle. He smiled slightly. She's going to be spoiled rotten by every wolf in the pack. Fair warning. The thought of her daughter being celebrated instead of hunted made Cale's throat tight. She deserves to be spoiled. She does. Dristan's expression went serious. But we'll need to be careful about her training. Healing magic is powerful, but it comes with risks. Using too much can drain her life force. She needs to learn limits and control before she hurts herself. I know. Kyle had spent 5 years terrified that Sarah would accidentally expose her gifts and hurt herself in the process. She wants to help everyone. Every injured animal, every sick packmate. I've been teaching her to hold back, but it kills her inside. Then we teach her to help safely. Dristan's thumb stroked the back of her hand. The royal healers will work with her. She'll learn to use her gift without damaging herself. And when she's older, she can decide how she wants to use her power. Healer, warrior, leader, whatever calls to her spirit. The vehicle slowed as they passed through massive gates into what looked like a small city. Buildings rose on either side of wide streets, and wolves in various forms moved about their business. Some stopped to stare as the convoy passed, their eyes going wide with recognition. Home, Dristan said quietly. Welcome to Silvercrest. The castle, because it was definitely a castle, rose at the center of the city like something out of a fairy tale. White stone towers reached toward the sky, banners in silver and midnight blue snapping in the wind. The convoy pulled into a courtyard where dozens of wolves had already gathered, clearly alerted to the Alpha King's return. Dristan climbed out first, then reached back to lift Sarah into his arms. The little girl clung to his neck, suddenly shy in the face of so many strangers. Cale followed, and immediately felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her. Brothers and sisters of Silvercrest, Dristan's voice carried across the courtyard with alpha projection. I present to you my fated mate, Cale, and our daughter, Sarah. They are under my personal protection and will be treated with the respect and honor due to Luna Queen and Princess of the Realm. Anyone who fails to show proper deference will answer to me personally. The gathered wolves dropped to one knee in unison, their heads bowed in submission. Cale felt her wolf respond to the display, felt the instinctive recognition of her place in the hierarchy. Luna Queen. The words still felt impossible, but looking at the bowed heads of powerful alphas and warriors, she began to understand the reality of what had happened. "Rise," Tristan commanded, and the wolves obeyed instantly. "Kael, Sarah, these are your pack now. Every wolf here would die to protect you." An older female stepped forward, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Alpha King, Luna Queen, I am Maris, head of household staff. Your rooms have been prepared, and healers stand ready should you need anything." "Thank you, Maris." Dristan's formal tone softened slightly. "My maiden daughter have been through an ordeal. They need rest, food, and peace. See to it that they have everything they require." "Of course, Alpha King." Maris turned to Kael with a warm smile. "If you'll follow me, Luna Queen, I'll show you to your chambers." The title still made Kael's stomach flip, but she nodded and moved to follow. Dristan fell into step beside her, Sira still secure in his arms. "I'm not leaving you alone yet," he said quietly. "Not until you're comfortable." The admission made something warm bloom in her chest. This powerful male, this Alpha King who could command armies with a word, was worried about her comfort. It was such a stark contrast to every alpha she'd ever known that it made her dizzy. Maris led them through corridors that belonged in a palace, all soaring ceilings and elegant archways. Other wolves passed them in the halls, each stopping to bow respectfully before hurrying on. Finally, they reached a set of double doors that Maris pushed open with a flourish. "The Luna Queen's suite," she announced, "and the princess's room connects through that door there." Kael stepped inside and her breath caught. The rooms were beautiful, all soft fabrics and warm colors, with enormous windows that overlooked the city below. A fireplace dominated one wall, already lit and crackling cheerfully. The furniture looked comfortable and inviting, nothing like the stark functionality of Omega quarters. "There's a bathing room through there," Maris pointed to another door. "Hot water always available. Clean clothes have been provided in sizes we estimated, but we'll have proper measurements taken and new wardrobes created within the week." "Is there anything else you need immediately?" Kael's voice failed her. "This is too much. This is what you deserve." Dristan had moved to the connecting door and pushed it open, revealing a child's paradise beyond. A large bed with a canopy, shelves filled with toys and books, a window seat perfect for reading. "Sarah, would you like to see your room?" The little girl lifted her head from his shoulder and gasped at the sight. "Is that all mine?" "Every bit of it." Dristan set her down gently, and she immediately ran to investigate, her previous exhaustion forgotten in the face of such treasures. He turned back to Kael with an expression that made her heart skip. "I'll leave you both to rest, but tonight we eat together as a family, just the three of us. No formality, no spectacle, just us." "I'd like that," Kael whispered. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite his obvious strength. "You're safe here, both of you. I swear it on my life, my crown, and my wolf. Nothing will ever hurt you again." Then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. The mate bond sang between them, golden light pulsing in time with their heartbeats. When he pulled back, Kael was breathless and trembling and more alive than she'd felt in 5 years. "Rest," Dristan murmured against her lips. "I'll come back at sunset." He left reluctantly, pausing at the door to look back at her one more time before disappearing into the corridor. Kael stood frozen in the center of her new rooms, her fingers pressed to her lips, hardly daring to believe this was real. "Mama," Sarah's voice called from the other room. "Come look. There's a dollhouse bigger than me." Kael moved through the connecting door on shaking legs and found her daughter surrounded by treasures, her face lit up with wonder. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah looked like what she was, a happy, excited child with no fear shadowing her eyes. "Do you like it?" Kael asked softly. "I love it." Sarah abandoned her exploration and threw her arms around Kael's waist. "And I love Papa. He's really nice and strong, and he smells like home." That last observation made Kael's eyes sting with tears. Because Sarah was right. Dristan did smell like home, like safety, like everything they'd been missing. The mate bond had recognized what her conscious mind had been too afraid to accept. They belonged to him, and he to them. "Yes, baby," Kael whispered into her daughter's hair. "He does." As the sun set over Silvercrest and Kael helped Syrah explore all her new treasures, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 long years. Hope. And when Dristan returned at sunset with a tray of food and that soft smile reserved just for them, when he swept Syrah up into his arms and pulled Kael close against his side, when they sat together by the fire and talked and laughed like they'd been a family forever, Kael knew with absolute certainty that she'd finally found what she'd been running toward all along. Home. Safety. Love. A place where lost pups and rejected omegas could finally stop running. A place where they could finally rest. 3 weeks of peace shattered the moment the Council of Alphas demanded an emergency session. Kael stood in the great hall with Dristan at her side, watching 43 alpha wolves file into the chamber with expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. She'd known this moment would come the formal challenge to her position as Luna Queen. What she hadn't expected was the carefully orchestrated nature of it, or the cold fury radiating from the massive alpha who took the center position before Dristan's throne. Alpha King Dristan. The speaker was a brute of a male named Ragnar, his scarred face twisted with disdain as his eyes raked over Kael. "We come before you united in our concern for the stability of the Northern Realm. This Omega you've claimed as your mate, she brings no alliance, no territory, no strength to your position. She weakens us. Choose your next words very carefully, Ragnar." Dristan's voice dropped to something lethal, and Kael felt his wolf rise to the surface, dominant and deadly. "You're questioning my judgment as your king. We question the moon goddess herself if she would bind our Alpha King to worthless Omega trash." Another Alpha stepped forward, a female named Vex with cold blue eyes. "We've investigated her background. She was pack refuse, used for the worst tasks, nearly culled multiple times for disobedience. And you would make this creature our Luna Queen? You insult every strong female in this realm." The words struck like physical blows, each one a reminder of everything Kael had endured, every humiliation she'd suffered. She felt her wolf curl up small inside her chest, trying to make herself invisible the way she'd learned to survive. "Furthermore," Ragnar continued, emboldened by Vex's support, "we demand DNA verification of the child you claim as your heir. It's too convenient that this Omega appears with a daughter after 5 years, claiming the child is yours with no proof beyond matching eye color and a convenient story about a night you can't remember. I remember every detail of that night. Dristan's dominance slammed outward with crushing force, driving lesser wolves to their knees. I remember dying in a forest, my throat torn open, my blood soaking into the earth. I remember golden light and gentle hands. I remember waking alone, with my wounds healed, and the certainty that I'd just lost my fated mate. Memories can be manipulated by powerful magic," Vex said coldly. "We demand proof, blood tests, magical verification. A formal challenge to determine if this Omega is truly worthy to stand as Luna Queen." "There will be no challenge." Dristan descended from the dais with predatory grace, and Kael watched every alpha in the room tense with instinctive fear. "Kael is my fated mate. The bond between us is witnessed by the moon goddess herself. Anyone who questions that bond can face me in the old way, combat to the death. Winner takes all." "We don't question the bond," Ragnar said carefully. "We question whether she deserves to be Luna Queen. A bond can exist without elevation. Keep her as your mate if you must, but give us a Luna Queen with strength, with power, with the ability to lead." The suggestion hung in the air like poison, and Kael felt something crack inside her chest. They wanted to reduce her to nothing more than Dristan's bedmate, a secret kept hidden while some other female took her rightful place. The old shame rose up to choke her, the certainty that she would never be good enough, never be worthy, never be anything more than the Omega everyone looked through. "No." The word came out before Kael could stop it, her voice shaking but determined. She stepped forward, placing herself between Dristan and the assembled alphas. You want proof? You want to see if I'm worthy? Then I accept your challenge. Kael Dristan's hand closed around her wrist, his emotions crashing through the bond in waves of protective fury. No. She looked up at him, and she saw her own fear reflected in his golden eyes. They're right. I bring no alliance, no territory, no political advantage. If I'm going to be Luna Queen, I need to prove I deserve it. Not because you chose me, but because I earned it. You don't need to prove anything to them. Dristan's voice had gone rough with emotion. You're my mate. That's all that matters. It matters to me. Kael turned back to Ragnar and Vex, her wolf rising to stand beside her consciousness for the first time in her life. What's your challenge? Combat? Trial by ordeal? Name it, and I'll meet it. The assembled alphas exchanged glances, clearly not expecting an Omega to have the courage to stand before them. Ragnar's lips curled in a cruel smile. The Luna trials, he said. 3 tests designed to prove a female's worth to lead. Strength, wisdom, power. If you pass all 3, we'll accept you as Luna Queen. If you fail even one, you step aside and let a worthy female take your place. The Luna trials haven't been invoked in over 200 years, Dristan said flatly. They were designed to test alpha females, not omegas. The strength trial alone would kill her. Then perhaps she shouldn't be Luna Queen. Vex's voice dripped with false sympathy. If she can't survive the trials, she has no business leading this pack. I'll do it. Kael's voice came out stronger than she felt. When? 3 days from now, Ragnar said immediately. That gives you time to prepare, though I doubt it will help. An Omega has never passed the Luna trials. You'll die in the first test, and we can finally move forward with finding our Alpha King a proper mate. Council dismissed. Dristan's command cracked through the hall like a whip. Get out, all of you, now. The alphas filed out slowly, most wearing expressions of satisfaction. They'd gotten what they wanted, a chance to remove Kael from power without directly challenging their king. The moment the doors closed behind them, Dristan rounded on her with fury and fear warring in his expression. What were you thinking? His hands gripped her shoulders, not hard enough to hurt, but tight enough to convey his desperation. The Luna trials are designed to break alpha females. The strength trial requires shifting and fighting 3 opponents simultaneously. The wisdom trial involves navigating a maze filled with psychological torture and impossible choices. The power trial, his voice broke. The power trial requires you to withstand direct dominance from every alpha in the realm at once. It would crush your mind. Then I'll find a way to survive it. Kael reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. Dristan, if I don't do this, they'll never accept me. Every decision I make will be questioned. Every order I give will be ignored. I'll be Luna Queen in name only, and our daughter will grow up watching them disrespect her mother. I don't care what they think, but I do. The admission came out raw and honest. I've spent my entire life being nothing, being invisible, being used and discarded. For once, just once, I want to prove that I'm worth something, that I'm strong enough to stand beside you, not because fate chose me, but because I fought for it. Dristan stared at her for a long moment, emotions crashing through the bond too fast to identify. Then he pulled her against his chest and held her with desperate strength. If anything happens to you, he whispered into her hair, if you die in those trials, it will destroy me. You understand that? It will break something in me that can never be repaired. Then help me prepare. Kael pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I have 3 days. Train me. Teach me. Give me every advantage you can. I'm not going into this blind. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of brutal training and desperate preparation. Dristan called in every favor, recruited the best warriors in the realm to teach Kael fighting techniques adapted for her smaller Omega frame. He had the royal healers examine her thoroughly, looking for any hidden strengths or weaknesses. And late at night, when Sarah was asleep and they were alone, he held Kael close and whispered strategies and encouragement until she fell asleep against his chest. You don't fight like an alpha. Dristan told her on the second day as they sparred in the training yard. Stop trying to match their strength. Use your speed, your flexibility, your size. An Omega's wolf is built for endurance and evasion, not direct confrontation. Kale ducked under his strike and spun away, her smaller wolf form darting between his legs. Like this? Exactly like that. Pride flashed through the bond. They'll expect you to fight like an alpha, because that's all they know. Surprise them. Be unpredictable. On the third day, as dawn broke over Silvercrest, Kale stood in the great arena with thousands of wolves gathered to witness the Luna trials. Sarah sat in the royal box with Maris, her small face pale with worry. Dristan stood at the edge of the fighting pit, his hands gripped white-knuckled on the railing. First trial, Ragnar announced from the opposite side of the arena. Strength. The challenger must defeat 3 opponents in shifted form. Submission or death ends each round. Begin. 3 wolves entered the pit, all of them large, experienced warriors who'd clearly been chosen specifically to destroy an Omega. Kyle shifted, her bones cracking and reforming until she stood on 4 legs, her russet-colored wolf, smaller than any alpha, but sleek and quick. The crowd murmured with derision, clearly expecting this to be over quickly. The first warrior lunged, his massive jaws aimed for her throat. Kael didn't try to meet the attack head-on. Instead, she dropped and rolled, letting his momentum carry him over her. While he struggled to recover, she darted in and raked her claws across his exposed belly, not deep enough to kill, but enough to draw blood and pain. The warrior yelped and stumbled, and Kael pressed her advantage, using her speed to stay just out of reach while landing strike after strike. When he finally collapsed from blood loss and exhaustion, the crowd had gone silent with shock. Second round, Ragnar called, his voice tight with anger. The second warrior was smarter, more cautious. She tried to corner Kael, using her superior size to cut off escape routes. But Kael remembered Dristan's words, Omegas were built for endurance. She led the warrior on a chase around the pit, never stopping, never engaging directly, just staying maddeningly out of reach. 20 minutes passed, then 30, and the larger wolf began to tire, her movements growing sluggish. When she finally stumbled, Kael struck fast and brutal, locking her jaws around the warrior's throat and holding until submission came. The third warrior entered with visible reluctance, having watched Kael dismantle 2 experienced fighters. This one tried to use psychology, growling and posturing to trigger Kael's instinctive submission responses. But Kael had spent 5 years resisting the urge to submit, 5 years protecting her daughter from discovery. She held firm against the dominance, then attacked while the warrior was distracted by her own display. It was over in less than 5 minutes. Kael shifted back to human form, breathing hard but standing. Blood dripped from cuts on her arms and legs. But she'd won. She'd actually won. Second trial, Vex announced coldly. Wisdom. The challenger enters the maze and must navigate to the center, making choices that demonstrate the judgment necessary to lead. You have 1 hour. The maze entrance yawned before her like a hungry mouth. Kael stepped inside, and immediately the world shifted into nightmare. The walls weren't physical, they were psychological, each turn presenting impossible scenarios that demanded immediate decision. A child screaming for help, but moving toward the sound would abandon wounded warriors who needed her healing. Kael closed her eyes and reached for her gift, letting golden light pour from her palms to heal the warriors, trusting that someone else could save the child. The maze approved, walls shifting to open a new path. A choice between saving her mate or her daughter, both held at knife point by invisible enemies. Kael's heart screamed to choose, but her mind recognized the trap. I choose neither, she said aloud, because my mate would die to protect our daughter, and she would never forgive me if I let him die for her. We find a third option, or we die trying together. The maze shuddered, walls rearranging with what felt like reluctant approval. Scenario after scenario, each designed to break her spirit or prove her unworthy. But Kael had spent 5 years making impossible choices, weighing her daughter's safety against every other consideration. She navigated the maze with hard-won wisdom, choosing mercy when strength was expected, choosing ruthlessness when compassion would fail, always thinking 3 steps ahead. When she stumbled out of the maze entrance 57 minutes later, the assembled crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. No one had expected an Omega to survive the wisdom trial, let alone pass it so decisively. "Final trial," Ragnar said, and now his voice carried open hatred. "Power. The challenger must withstand direct dominance from every alpha present 43 alpha wolves projecting their full strength simultaneously for 5 full minutes without submitting or losing consciousness." Kael's knees went weak. This was the trial designed to kill her. No Omega had ever withstood even a single alpha's full dominance, let alone 43 at once. Through the bond, she felt Dristan's terror, his desperate desire to stop this before it destroyed her. But she met his eyes across the arena and shook her head slightly. She had to do this. For herself, for Syrah, for every Omega who'd ever been told they were worthless. "I'm ready," she said clearly. The alphas formed a circle around her, and Kael felt their combined dominance begin to build like a gathering storm. It started as pressure, then became pain, then transformed into something that threatened to crush her consciousness entirely. Every instinct screamed at her to bare her throat, to drop to her knees, to submit and make the pain stop. But Kael didn't fight against the dominance. Instead, she did something no one expected. She opened herself to it completely, let it wash through her like water through a sieve. She was Omega. She was meant to receive dominance, to withstand it, to transform it into something useful for the pack. Fighting made it stronger. Accepting made it pass through harmlessly. 30 seconds. Her vision started to blur. 60 seconds. Blood trickled from her nose. 90 seconds. Her legs trembled violently, but she remained standing. 2 minutes. The healers in the crowd were calling for the trial to stop, saying she wouldn't survive. 3 minutes. Kael felt her healing magic activate instinctively, golden light pulsing beneath her skin as her body tried to repair the damage the dominance was causing. 4 minutes. She dropped to one knee but kept her head up, kept her throat protected, kept fighting. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Through the crushing weight of dominance, Kael heard Sarah screaming for her mama, and that small voice gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. 5 minutes. The dominance cut off abruptly, and Kael collapsed forward onto her hands, gasping for breath. Blood ran from her nose and ears, her entire body shaking with exhaustion. But she was conscious. She was alive, and she hadn't submitted. The arena had gone completely silent, thousands of wolves staring at the small Omega who'd done the impossible. She passed. Dristan's voice rang out with absolute authority. "By the laws of the Luna trials, witnessed by all, Kael is proven worthy to stand as Luna Queen. Does any alpha here dispute this?" Silence. Even Ragnar and Vex looked shocked, unable to argue with what they'd witnessed. "Then kneel," Dristan commanded, his voice carrying alpha compulsion that even the strongest couldn't resist. "Kneel before your Luna Queen." 43 alphas dropped to their knees as one, their heads bowed in submission. The rest of the assembled pack followed, thousands of wolves acknowledging Kael's worth, her strength, her right to lead. Dristan was at her side in an instant, lifting her into his arms with hands that shook. "You incredible, terrifying, amazing female," he whispered against her hair. "I've never been so proud and so angry at the same time in my life." "Did I pass?" Kael's voice came out slurred, exhaustion pulling at her consciousness. "You didn't just pass. You dominated." He carried her toward the royal box, where Sarah waited with tear-streaked cheeks. "You're officially Luna Queen now. No one can ever question it again." The healing took 2 days. Kael's magic worked overtime, repairing the damage the dominance trial had caused. But she was strong enough to attend the formal claiming ceremony that followed. She stood beside Dristan before the assembled pack, wearing silver and midnight blue, and accepted the Luna Queen's crown with steady hands. "I accept this position not because I'm strong enough to match any alpha," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the crowd. But because I'm strong enough to survive what would break them, I accept because I know what it means to be underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. And I swear on the moon goddess herself that no Omega in this realm will ever be treated as worthless again. We are the foundation of pack strength. We are the healers and caregivers, and the steady hands that build what warriors protect. And under my leadership as Luna Queen, every Omega will know their worth. The crowd roared approval, and Kale felt Dristan's pride and love crash through the bond with such intensity it brought tears to her eyes. That night, in the private ceremony chamber, they completed the mating bond properly. Dristan's bite on her throat, her bite on his, the exchange of vows that would bind them until death. And afterward, as they lay tangled together in the enormous bed, Kael finally let herself believe this was real. "We should get married," Dristan murmured against her skin. "Properly. Human ceremony and wolf ritual combined. I want every being in this realm to know you're mine." "Is that a proposal?" Kael smiled against his chest. "It's a statement of fact. But if you want me on my knee..." He started to move, but she pulled him back down. "I want you exactly where you are." She kissed him slowly, deeply, feeling the bond sing between them. "Yes, let's get married. Let's give Sarah the family she deserves." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the grand hall, decorated with silver flowers and midnight blue silk. Sarah served as flower girl, her small face glowing with happiness as she scattered petals down the aisle. Kael wore a gown that made her look like moonlight given form, and when Dristan saw her, his emotions through the bond nearly drove her to her knees. "You're so beautiful," he whispered as she took his hands before the assembled pack. "So strong, so perfect." The ceremony bound them in every way that mattered human marriage. Wolf mating, Luna Queen claiming her throne beside her Alpha King. And when they exchanged rings forged from silver and blessed by the moon goddess herself, Kael felt the final piece of her heart slot into place. This was home. This was safety. This was love. In the months that followed, Kael transformed the Omega social structure throughout the Northern Realm. She established schools where Omegas could train in their natural gifts, healing, empathy, diplomacy, caregiving, elevated to honored professions rather than servitude. She created laws protecting Omega rights and bodily autonomy, and she opened the Royal Healing Center where any wolf in need could receive care, with Sarah learning to control and strengthen her gifts under careful supervision. "Mama, look!" Sarah called from across the training yard one afternoon. She touched a wilted plant, and golden light flowed from her palms, the flowers blooming back to vibrant life. "I can heal plants now, too!" "That's wonderful, baby." Kael watched her daughter with pride and fierce protectiveness. Sarah would grow up knowing she was valued, knowing her gifts were celebrated rather than feared, knowing she never had to hide who she was. "She's going to be extraordinary," Dristan said quietly, wrapping his arms around Kael from behind. "Just like her mother." "We're going to need a bigger castle," Kael said with a smile. "I'm pregnant." She felt the exact moment the news registered through the bond, felt Dristan's shock and overwhelming joy crash into her like a wave. He spun her around, his hands gentle on her waist, his eyes searching hers. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "The healers confirmed it this morning." She placed her hands over his. "A son. Strong and healthy. Due in 7 months." Dristan dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat stomach, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for surviving. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for giving me this family." "We gave each other this family," Kael corrected gently, running her fingers through his dark hair. "We fought for it together." And as the sun set over Silvercrest, as Sarah ran up to demand to know why Papa was crying, as the pack moved about their business in the city below, Kael finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a building, not even a title or crown. Home was this family gathered close, love freely given, acceptance without question, safety without fear. Home was knowing that every lost pup would always have a place to run to, that every rejected Omega would find sanctuary, that every wolf who'd been told they were worthless would discover their true value. Home was the Alpha King, who'd tracked her through 5 years and 43 territories because his soul recognized hers. Home was the daughter who'd revealed her gifts because she couldn't stand to see someone suffer. Home was the son growing beneath her heart who would be raised knowing both his parents had fought impossible battles for love. And as Dristan rose and pulled both his girls close, as the mate bond pulsed golden and strong between them, Kale knew with absolute certainty that she would never run again. She was exactly where she belonged. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching.